Hi, everyone. I'm Greg Sixt from Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Abdul Latif Jameel Water and Food Systems Lab, where I lead the Food and Climate Systems Transformation Alliance, a global network of research institutions and stakeholder organizations focused on food systems research for action, engaging with stakeholders. This is our fourth dialogue in a series of 5, being organized by BOKU University in Vienna, Austria, in collaboration with CIFOR-ICRAF and, of course, the J-WAFS at MIT. The topic of today's dialogue is quite pressing and relevant. It seems like every time we open the news, it seems like there's another conflict. Oftentimes low intensity, not even interstate conflict. Communal conflicts, increasing fragility in our food systems. So this is a highly relevant topic. We're focusing today initially kind of on the Horn of Africa, as it's one of the regions most affected by environmental change and climate security concerns. And this dialogue will ask kind of what ongoing conflicts mean and communal instability for environmental shifts, and explore the impact of climate change on the region's food production and livelihoods. While we are kind of focusing on the Horn of Africa, this conversation will go beyond just the Horn. We're using it as a kind of discussion point for today. So without further ado, I want to hand this dialogue off to my colleague, Dr. Michael Hauser. Michael, I'll let you take the wheel from now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Greg. Also from my side, a warm welcome to everyone out there. I'm calling in from Nairobi. Now, I'm here with a fabulous panel to discuss the linkages between environmental degradation and conflict, and the linkages between regeneration and peace and stability at community level, at higher system level, as Greg pointed out. It is my pleasure to be with Sharon Kibor, Center for Peace and Democracy. Welcome. Leigh, Winowiecki, CIFOR-ICRAF, calling in from Nairobi. Dereje, Wakjira from IGAD, and Immaculate Adel, MIT, J-WAFS, and Fact Alliance. Now, Immaculate will move to the back in a minute, but she will actively monitor your questions and contributions. And in about 20 minutes, we'll open the floor for a Q&A session before we go to the next main topic. We also have Abdiya Hassan on the call. She's calling in from northern Kenya, Mandera, but apparently and unfortunately having connectivity issues that we are sorting out at the back end. If we can't manage to solve the technical hinges, then please apologize for her absence this time. Now, I would like to start by turning the title of this webinar around and ask, a critical question, and that is the link between environmental degradation and conflict. Is there one? Sharon Kibor, you've been working across the Horn of Africa, calling in from Somalia currently. Is there a direct link between environmental degradation and conflict? And if yes, of what nature?
Thank you, Michael, and good evening, everyone. Absolutely, there is a link between environmental degradation. There is a link between climate change and conflict. And I'm speaking on behalf of a national organization. So this is really what is happening on the ground. So we know that most of the communal conflict that we see in Somalia and in the countries around the Horn is driven by scarcity of resources. And if you look around, it's as a result of long-term environmental degradation, as well as the impacts of climate change. And this can be seen across the Horn of Africa. And as a result, we see huge numbers of communities being displaced. And the displaced communities move to areas that have accessibility to water, especially in Somalia context, they would move to where they can access water. And because, they get help from the government, from aid organizations, once water is drilled in a place, the assumption is that this displaced community is taking over somebody else's communal land. And that also creates another potential for additional conflict. On the other hand,
Sharon, you're muted, but let's move on. Thanks for this opening statement. Leigh, from your practical work on restoration, if you turn it around, what are the practical examples that you have seen where resource degradation actually increases fragility?
Great, thank you so much. So as you stated in my opening, I'm a soil scientist and I lead the soil and land health research theme at CIFOR-ICRAF. So please let me just bring in this perspective from the soil up. So soil, healthy soil, provides multiple ecosystem services, providing nutrients for plants, for agriculture, storing carbon for climate change adaptation and mitigation, storing and purifying water, providing habitat for microorganisms. So what we're here to talk about today is that over 1/3 of the Earth's surface is degraded. That means that soil cannot provide those critical ecosystem services. So a degraded ecosystem, a degraded soil is more vulnerable to climate change. For example, northern Kenya is not the green background behind me. Northern Kenya, where you have compacted soil, low organic carbon, high erosion. We just had massive rains. Anyone who is reading the news, massive rain. What happens when that rain, when that water meets the soil? It cannot be absorbed. It's compacted. So then you have massive erosion, flooding events. So this is just an example to get us thinking about the relationship between degradation and vulnerability to climate change. So I can speak to restoration in the next round.
Yeah, the question also is whether that vulnerability to the impacts of climate change would eventually lead to communal tensions over scarce resources. Dereje, what is your perspective from that, from an IGAD standpoint?
Thank you very much. I think it is well, in one way or another, highlighted by both Sharon and Leigh. Land degradation is one factor. Overall, what happened is the IGAD region is the dry land, and most of the inhabitants are pastoral or agro-pastoral that move from place to place to access forage and water during different seasons. This access is disrupted because of 4 reasons. One is climate change, climate variability, that also aggravates water scarcity as well as rangeland degradation. The other thing is, big conflicts, like conflicts that will stop access. And the other one is also core ecosystem are also, there is a scramble for land, so access. So these people who have lost their access, traditional access, they move to another place. And this other place has other users. And this is how it triggers conflict and aggravating one support the other. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is displacement as one secondary driver of tensions in communities. But isn't it also often a story of political economy, a story of politics, of resource degradation that takes place in a larger power struggle that is then sneaking in, and eventually it's hard to distinguish what is actually contributing to what?
I think it's very much intermingled. You can bring in a political economy. The core ecosystem, that where grazing has been happening, it's sometimes grabbed for irrigation or even by communities for opportunistic farming. When communities lose such a key ecosystem, vulnerability is high, and people will look for other alternatives. And that alternative is not easily found because you will encroach to other communities, and that's one of the driver of conflicts. The other thing is, if we lose like 4 consecutive rainy season, what will happen to the grass biomass? Potential of recovery, potential of calming and providing that biomass will decline. It reinforced by the livestock, again, trampling, and water percolation is poor, then degradation is happening. Then people will look other areas, and that other area will trigger conflict. So it is very much interdependent. The unregulated land management, where land use is not respected, land use be changed overnight, and all prime key ecosystems have been for grab, and that's aggravating the whole, leave alone the climate change, which is a serious issue.
Right. Thank you, Dereje. Abdiya, Hassan, can you hear us? Okay, you're muted.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. Abdiya, you're with Women for Peace and Development, calling in from Mandera.
Yes.
Can you share with us a very practical example where environmental degradation leads to tensions in households, in communities, and what nature are those tensions?
Okay, the tension mostly starts with resources right from the beginning, and when there's this long drought is on, there's a shortage of pasture and water, and there's also land ownership where people think maybe some community cannot move from this place to this place, and once that happens and the community moves from their grazing land or their water places and looks for water from other area, then they will have a problem. They will be seen as they have come to use their resources. And pastoralists, if their livestock are refused to water or resources, then they can easily fight. They will use force. Once force is used, then the problem starts. And again, it turns into a community, into a small clan, into now that is most of the things people fight on, especially land ownership and grass and resources.
Right.
Water.
Well, Abdiya, follow-up question. I mean, many communities have a fairly sophisticated, set of rules and regulations, local institutions. Is the climate change and the environmental degradation we're currently seeing overruling those local institutions?
Yeah,
that would mitigate the issues.
What it indicates is some community moving away from where they used to graze their land, their animals, or moving to another area where they have never been seen, and looking in search of water and pasture. And that is the most critical part, because these are people who have livestock, and their livelihood is mostly on this livestock. They don't have any other income. So once they feel there's something somewhere, they must go and take care of the animals there. And those who are there also ready to defend their resources. Now the conflict escalates.
Okay, good. So what I'm hearing is linkages between environmental degradation, changing weather patterns, the scramble of over resources, and social fragility that could translate into conflicts. But we've also said it's a highly complex story. Yeah, it's not just every soil erosion leads to a tension within or between communities. It's also politics. It's the land tenure system. It's the entire setup of the food system in which people operate that gets out of balance, and conflict is an expression of that. I would like now to turn from that to the actual purpose of this conversation, which is understanding whether regreening landscapes, reversing degradation, increasing environmental health, land health, soil health would eventually make a contribution to peace and stability. And we are not suggesting here that the greener the landscape, the more peaceful the setup. But we want to work out what the contributions are. That what can we see from landscape restoration as a potential contributor? Leigh, I mean, you've been known for soil and land health and land restoration amongst several other colleagues at CIFOR-ICRAF. I mean, what is the practical evidence that you see out there where you can actually make contributions to peace and stability? And if yes, in what way? What are the mechanisms? How does it work?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Thank you so much. So just another statistic to set the scene. It's estimated that over 65% of all agricultural land in Africa is degraded. So when we talk about restoration, it's going to be with and by farmers, with and by pastoralists. So I think that this is a really important element that we need to acknowledge. And so addressing what Hassan was talking about communal land and community action. So we have a number of restoration projects, including one with IGAD and Dereje on Drylands Transform, and also the Regreening Africa. And in Regreening Africa, we aim to restore 1 million hectares of land, and 270,000 farmers have registered, geolocated their restoration activities on the land. So that's reducing erosion, increasing tree cover, increasing on-farm tree biodiversity. And some of the things we're seeing is real community building just in the act of implementing restoration. So that has been really positive. In Ethiopia, in northern Ethiopia, actually, we even documented how by restoring herbaceous cover, covering the soil, increasing tree cover, springs were coming back to life. Springs that had actually dried up or starting to flow. So this conflict over water resources was essentially dissolving and being washed away. And so the other example is around food security. So in this Regreening Africa project, a lot of the all the interventions were on farmers' fields. Well, turns out, because of many processes, the increase of these tree biodiversity on farm is actually increasing some of these dryling crops that often were not surviving through drought. So this removing that tension of food security. So these are just 3 concrete examples. And I think, again, just highlighting that to reach any of these restoration targets is going to be by the pastoralists, by the farmers, and it's going to be on farm. And so this idea of community-based conservation, rangeland restoration is critical. Thanks.
Right, Sharon, you're nodding. I mean, what I'm hearing from Leigh is actually, you know, Leigh, forgive me, it's less the soils and the trees and the water, but it's more the people that would work on the water and the trees and the soils, and through that people then make a decent contribution to cohesion. How does that play out in your work, Sharon? Sharon, you have Sharon Kibor, you have the.
Absolutely, and I like that Leigh is talking. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Am I audible? Okay. I like that Leigh is talking about people and not places. And I think that shift of looking at conservation from, you know, people's livelihoods is exactly what we need to see in Somalia. There's a bit of examples in terms of enclosing pasture land and, you know, and letting land regenerate, and examples where seed balls have been, you know, planted, and, you know, but the biggest challenge with that is that, you know, climate change continues to make it really difficult for regeneration to happen. So critical thinking around how do we support pastoralists to be able to adapt in the short term, but, you know, support their ecosystems to regenerate is really needed in contexts like Somalia.
Thanks, thanks, Sharon. I'd like to move on to Abdiya and then to Dereje. Abdiya, Hassan, from from your perspective, where you sit, what are the biggest contribution that environmental rehabilitation can actually make, you know, in terms of peace and security in northern Kenya, and you're also working across the border in the region?
I think, first of all, looking at northern Kenya, it is naturally a dry land. And once, maybe in a year, it rains 3 times or 3 times, or even that time, it doesn't rain heavily. It rains sometimes short, it's sometimes a bit better. So having this region green, is only this El Nino that has given enough water, and right now it is green all over. But as time goes, it changes dry, and if you want to green it, then you have to have water all over. Water is very essential, and using that for water, then you can ask the communities to plant as many trees as possible, and you can advise the farmers to farm their farms, and through maybe technical advice from agriculture, they can improve their land. Since most of this community are animal herders, they are not great farmers, but since most of the animal have now perished, they might be forced to become farmers if only they get enough water and enough
Right.
water, and yeah.
Right, Abdiya, this is, I think, no one on this call would disagree that the better access to water we have, the higher the likelihood to regreen the landscape. But what is actually contributing to stability here? What is increasing the resilience within community to withstand future tensions? Is it simply more resources, hence
It's not simply okay, it is not only resources, but we are neighboring with Somalia, Ethiopia, and this is a triangle, for example, Mandera. And we have a militia group in everywhere, and we have the Al-Shabaab, who are our people always trying to attack and get in through. And you will find that Mandera is at the border. But as time went, they have moved inside Mandera, the last way they almost connecting to Moyale. And that tension alone, and they started destroying, like the muscle that the Safaricom, they start killing people, they start taking people's animals, and the community again, even if they see, they can't report because they fear that they might fall into a trap even themselves. So all these things contribute insecurity, and
Thanks, Abdiya. We'll come back to that. Dereje, from an interstate perspective, you know,
yeah.
What IGAD's core mandate has the contribution environmental rehabilitation could make to peace and stability diffused into policy circles sufficiently? Where are we currently?
I think the central point is what highlighted by Leigh and the other, is a holistic approach of improving the resource, looking at the water management, and then increasing the biomass particularly in dry lands. Now, the land has capacity. We have seen on research, we have seen from applied practices, the land has a capacity to increase the biomass, maybe 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. What is that biomass? Is converted to food and supports livelihood and development, and also support ecosystem health. But the central issue is land is communal. You have to work at scale. And the core in this process is enhancing social capital, how people come together, agree to do something together. It's not everywhere. There are core ecosystems. For example, dry season grazing. Let's block it let's improve the water retention, let's enhance the biomass, and let's open this grazing at this particular season of the year. Now, this needs, yes, communities can agree. The rule of the day is formal rule. So there is a free rider, even if traditionally people agree, there are others who use formal system, and I just break that rule. So the formal rule should really support the communal land management system. Invest. It looks like it's an expensive adventure, but the long-term gain in terms of peace, in terms of livelihood, in terms of ecosystem health is tremendous. So centrally, how communities function, put input into the system. You know, there is no way that business as usual will support the health of the ecosystem, the livelihood of the people, maintain the peace. We are going to abandon the whole ecosystem, 17% of the landscape, unless we change the way we function. At IGAD level, there are two things that we are doing. A, we have a strategy regionally how to sustainably manage the dryland rangeland. We are supporting countries to adopt the strategy. We are also working with ILRI to have, you know, a harmonized participatory rangeland management, where we are aiming to support both institutions to govern their communal land, as well as also providing technical, so that this effort of not regreening per se, enhancing biomass, keeping a single tree it needs a lot of effort to bring a tree on dry land. Maintaining existing vegetation will be cost effective, but those species, it's not easy to bring them back. And that ecosystem is key for microclimate, key for nutrient cycle, key for even the shade when the climate is unbearable. So the whole approach is understanding communal management system, understanding with community, build on a traditional system, but the formal system has to also support the transformation. And that's what we are driving at the regional level. Thank you.
Thank you, Dereje. I want to pause here and ask Immaculate to please share with us a few questions and contributions from the audience, and I'd request the panel to offer brief responses in a few sentences, if possible. For those who raised their hands, sorry, we have actually disabled that function. So we can't hear you. You would have to type, please. Immaculate.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. Very interesting conversations. So I'll just pick out a few responses from the audience. And what I see is from Robert Busher, who asks, to what degree do we need to understand the economies of war in addition to political economy in order to mitigate conflicts?
Right. We hinted on this already. The political economy around tensions that eventually create larger scale conflicts. Who would like to respond? Dereje.
I think let me go for it. You know, in dryland Africa, livestock is thriving. Rainfield agriculture is struggling. And then the land is productive in its capacity. This is the land we have. We have to make something out of it. But the way we approach is out of context. Everybody knows communal land management system. We stand there, we build institutions. You can organize community, you can improve their communal land. There must be an incentive. Security that this improved rangeland remains theirs. So one of the issues is securing communal land rights to the owners, so that they can really have a control over it. They can say yes and no to themselves, or also to the external. And that also needs strong support from the government. It means it's the whole thinking of political economy. Let's make something out of this fragile ecosystem. There are people who are struggling producing food in this difficult ecosystem. Support. it's not like agriculture, you can easily be quantifying in sacks of wheat, but it has a long-term return. That's what I can say.
So it needs a political framework in which we restore, right? That shouldn't sound tautological here. Right? Thanks, Immaculate.
Yes, thank you. I have two double questions on land, which I'll try to combine. The first one is that it's a contribution actually, or a statement saying that it is near impossible to address resource-based conflict when land tenure is not clear, and this is more so in the pastoralist landscape. And then the second question, still linked to this one, is that how can we handle the question of competing land uses in some of the pastoral areas like Karamoja?
Right. So land tenure as an entry point. Isn't that the first thing one would have to fix before planting trees? Who would like to respond to that? Sharon or Abdiya? Sharon,
Yes,
please.
Thank you. I think the issue of land tenure, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. I think the issue of land tenure is critical, and I think in communities like in countries like Somalia, for example, it remains unregulated, and if you think about it, is linked to land ownership and something to do with land. So it's really critical that it's that there are systems in place, and a country that is struggling to stabilize would definitely have those challenges in the long term. But I agree that that is the starting point. But I know in countries like Kenya, they have a Communal Land Act that is helping with that. Secondly, land use and the rapid changing of land use. If you think about Somalia, areas that would have been very arable and possible to do agriculture production are the ones that have heavy settlements. So that land that would have been productive in that sense, then it's housing displaced people. So and you find that these towns crop up without proper planning, and then of course they become vulnerable to extreme climate risks like flooding and all that. So it remains as some type of a vicious cycle that needs to be dealt with. But the starting point for sure is addressing land tenure issues.
Right. Thanks, Immaculate. We have 27 contributions. We won't be able to read out all of them. Pick one, and then I request the others to type responses, and we'll see what we do. Excellent contributions from the audience. Thank you so much, Immaculate.
Sure. Thank you,
Difficult
Michael.
choice.
Yes. I'll just read what is in front of me from Martin. How can organizations do something to enhance the rights and knowledge of traditional communities and indigenous people to be more recognized as the real promoters of restoration and biodiversity conservation? So I'm guessing every panelist represents an organization. Probably they could answer from that perspective. Thank you.
Leigh, would you like to start? One sentence. What does CIFOR-ICRAF contribute in the field?
I think that you're right. Each organization has a different role. And in terms of how CIFOR-ICRAF enters, we're a scientific center of excellence. So we're very much looking at the impact of land tenure, the impact of these rules and regulations on restoration, on conflict, and of course, working from the community's perspective with communities, and then trying to leverage our international organization and position to influence policy decision makers. So I think that is where we would fit in.
Right. And let's not go through everyone here, but in your next contribution, please sneak things in. Immaculate, thanks a lot, and colleagues out there, we reached 32 contributions. Highly appreciate it. Greg, what you're making out of this conversation so far?
Yeah, so I've been looking at the Q&As, and there's a common, kind of one of the common themes are the social and political institutions that influence this. And what I've been hearing from the different panelists is kind of the human factor, right? The social and ecological approaches are important. So I actually kind of my larger question for the panelists is, Leigh, you highlighted some examples, some examples of success. Other colleagues have talked about varying degrees of success. So what have you seen as the factors that have led to the positive examples? There's no shortage of efforts globally, and kind of these ecological approaches to building resilience and social and ecological resilience, but there's far fewer successful examples than there are unsuccessful examples. So I'm curious, this is obviously not a scientific study, but from your perspective, from your experience, what have you seen as the sources of success? There's been a lot of discussion on land tenure and other aspects. So yeah, I'll open it up. I mean, Leigh, you're nodding, so I'll hand it to you, and then I'll let Michael kind of coordinate from there.
Great. Yeah, I think that is such a good question and very thoughtful. And of course, there are so many reasons for successes and failures, and they're very context specific. And so it's incredibly difficult to generalize. I can, from my experience, share a few insights. So one insight we've gained is the need to really address root causes of degradation, root causes of conflict, for example. We are often in this project cycle and need for quick results, and that leads to treating only symptoms. But really, by addressing root causes, the interventions can have greater sustainability, especially when they're identified and developed with the community. The second point is on the intervention itself. So there are no silver bullets. There's no one intervention that fits everywhere for everyone. And this is kind of the paradigm that we're completely turning upside down. We used to think that having one intervention and showing that on a demo plot was actually how you would scale. And that's how people before us trained us. But now through our research, our action research, it's illuminated new findings that in fact, tailored on-farm intervention is what is enabling scaling. And this is what our research is showing over and over again. We used to think that having a tailored approach to the social, economic, biophysical context was limiting, but in fact, it's not. It's actually what will scale. And then that leads to my final point. The point on monitoring, really being able to shift the paradigm of monitoring from a top-down approach to really assisted citizen science, to monitor the impacts of these tailored interventions has allowed us to, like I said, the Regreening app has 270,000 users across Africa. So now these communities can show governments, policymakers, donors, investors, and other community members how their interventions are being scaled and the impact they're having on especially biophysical context. So those are the three insights I was happy to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Leigh. In building on this, I want to ask Abdiya, Hassan, what about the local peace committees, and what about women in peace building? We've had earlier conversations on the topic. What are the critical contributions these local peace committees make, and actually women? Not to say that men start conflict and women contribute to solving it. You are muted.
Sorry for that. Peace committees are very important in our context because, most of the conflicts arises between communities, so another clan to another clan, and most of the time, as I told you before, they fight over resources. But when it comes now resolving that conflict, the elders and the religious leaders are very critical, and the dialogue between the communities, if it is fighting on, they will ask for ceasefire. They will intervene immediately, together with all those clans who are living within that area. Their elders are being respected, including the religious leaders. And the women are also, yeah, of course, before they used to say women cannot participate, but of late, I think there are a bit of changes, whereby as an organization, even ourselves, we are involved when there is a crisis somewhere. When the elders and the religious leaders are going, we have also to join them, go to the ground where the conflict is. We talk to the women. The women, you know, once there's tension, they can escalate that to something else, or they can even cool it down. Both both ways they can play. So as an organization, what we normally do, once we go to a village or a location or a sub-county, we normally meet with the women, hold them together, and when there are peace agreements, you know, these elders, and even together with the government, the county government, they make a resolution, they make an agreement, but reaching that to the grassroots, to the women at the village, is not there. But for us, an organization, we have been given the role of disseminating the outcome of the conflict resolution up to the village level. We go to almost every location, call the women under a tree. I can remember where there was the elders on another shed and the women on another shed, and we were disseminating the same information that has been agreed upon, and that is how we cool down the women at our own level. And the elders, the religious leaders, are highly respected. The administration and the local government, they are also involved. So the women are most of the time also, they are involved. Yeah.
Right. I want to move to the third. Thank you so much, Abdiya. I want to build on what you've just said. Ask Sharon, from your work experience, whether there's anything that women can do much better and that men actually can't do, and that is so critical to the peace committees, to integrating environmental concerns into the peace building agenda. That's actually the bridge into the third topic: how to grow closer together. How can we integrate peace building and environmental concerns more tighter?
Great question. I think some of the things that we also work with women, we think women play a critical role in building peace and in also conflict prevention. And I think some of the things we've seen work, women are the ones who carry the most burden of, the impacts of climate change and environmental degradation. So working with women to not only be agents of peace, not only to sit in peace committees, not only to be in the peace processes, but also supporting them to explore alternative livelihoods that push on families and help with, short-term adaptation and short-term, relief, even as we think of longer-term, regeneration and restoration work. So I think I mentioned earlier that it's really important that we think of how to provide, short-term and medium-term support to families and communities who are dependent on this land that is degraded, so that so we do that through different livelihood support work, thinking of additional options, some that are related to conservation. For example, working with women to, especially in the riverine areas in Somalia, to do fodder production, which they do bulking, which they keep and then they sell during the dry season. Some people have put up, camel farms, and they're doing zero grazing, in quotes, for camel, but you need to have money. So those are some of the small things that people are trying that are showing that it can help them to cope with these impacts. But then if you're asking people to leave a piece of land to regenerate, then you must give them an option, in the meantime, of how they will survive. So those are just some of the examples, and allowing women to be, the ones who are involved in this. And women are always happy, to explore other livelihood options. For example, you'll find that women are happier to try agriculture, because of also social norms and other cultural restrictions towards owning livestock. So it's way easier, to work with women in trying these other options. And I think those are just some of the examples that have been tried here in Somalia, and I think parts of Kenya as well.
Right. Thanks, Sharon. I want to move on to the last fundamental question here on this call for you and on the panel. Dereje, and I'll start with you, if you allow me. My impression is that the peace building community and the environmental rehabilitation community, they do exist, but in isolation of each other to a large extent. And I'm exaggerating here to make my point. What can be done to integrate these agendas more deliberately, more systematically? What would have to change at political level, at institutional level? Do we need new mindsets? Do we need different people? What is your view on that?
Thank you very much. I will talk from the perspective of dryland, where pastoralism and agropastoralism dominate. One of the problems in that is, let's say, in most of the peripheral states, they are left to themselves. They defend their assets with the means they have. And the key in this process is the governance. The rule of law should function equally where it functions, so that people will be assured of their assets is protected and prospering. Mm. And then this is one aspect. The natural resource degradation is an issue in the communal areas. There must be institutional building supporting the traditional institution and knowledge, at least prioritizing key ecosystem to come back because people have resource, people have time, they can do it. It just be.
Okay, but Dereje, what I mean is really how can the peace building folks and those who care about the landscape work together hand in hand with communities? What is needed for this, very practically?
It cannot be separated, Michael, because you can do a lot of investment. If the governance system is not in place, it's just multiple of zero, and then it frustrates investment. It means the governance in any way should be in place, working hand in hand. That governance means the security of land rights, quote unquote, land tenure, so that the people have incentive to invest in their land, and also protect their rights. So the governance structure from A to Z has to function so that people's right is protected. It cannot be environment rehabilitation cannot be separated. Peace building, peace is, there must be a deterrent that I will not be against. And there is also an understanding. If you lose the whole of your ecosystem to climate change, you can't go. How can we facilitate a social dialogue? There will be an opening for people in this kind of trouble so that others will accommodate or alternative livelihood be supported. So environmental rehabilitation, the governance system, and also social interaction. We are doing this for example, between Turkana and Karamojong for many years. Every season, grazing season, we'll bring elders, we'll bring administrators to talk about what is expected from the visitors, what is expected from the host. They agree even to the extent that the host will move deep into Uganda, giving way for the Turkana because the environment is unbearing at particular season of the year. So you
really have interstate agreements.
Yeah, it needs supporting from three important pillars: the environment, the governance, as well as also the social building. Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe my observation is incorrect. Maybe peace building and environmental conservation and all the other folks are already working well together. Sharon, before I go to Greg, what's your view on it? Is there homework to do in order to collaborate better across these groups?
you know, if you're working with the communities directly, the problems are just on your face and you have no option of not working together. So I think for us, it can't be done any other way. We are an organization that started off as a conflict management organization, but we are involved in humanitarian work. We're involved in environmental conservation. So it's all wrapped up in one, you know, it's the community facing all these things together. So there's a bit of collaboration on ground, but I think the emphasis should be on allowing communities to be in the, you know, in the lead in coming up with, you know, some of these ideas and being supported, so that, you know, the efforts are community-led, because then we will be, you know, providing appropriate responses and appropriate interventions. So I think there's a bit of that, but there's a lot of room for strengthening that, and having better coordination mechanisms would be good. And, you know, opportunities like this where, you know, all the different stakeholders have a chance to communicate and share experiences and learn from each other is a great start, but it could be, you know, made better and, you know, more coordinated and structured.
Right. Well, thanks. What I actually meant is that we needed environmental security and the whole debate around climate security eventually to bring these different groups of thoughts together, and actually that's good news. Greg, talking as a researcher, I mean, we are part of it, no?
Yeah. No, it's and that's, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. As a researcher, as someone who's, you know, leading a research network that's trying to address, you know, research for action, trying to provide research for action. You know, some of the things that I've pulled out of this conversation today are a few things. One is that some things I've heard as important are systems-oriented approaches to address kind of root causes, stakeholder partnership. You know, so actual partnership, not consultation, which doesn't necessarily, you know, doesn't build that buy-in, which can also support kind of monitoring and citizen science. Another key element is a long-term commitment. Leigh hit on the point of these project cycles tend to create an incentive towards short-term solutions. And my kind of takeaway is that all these things kind of support context-specific solutions. So for me, my kind of question for the group is, do we need a new research paradigm, right? I mean, I truly believe that research can play a really important role in affecting change. But when I look at a lot of these, this is not how, broadly speaking, research is done. Again, painting with a broad brush here. Do you all think, as practitioners, as people who are, you know, where the rubber meets the road, really, you know, or, you know, at the interface of action, do you think that, you know, the role of research is important and that there's a need for a new paradigm? And I kind of want to open this up for yes or no questions, since we've only got 3 minutes.
So that's
Sharon.
why, Greg.
Yeah,
go
ahead,
Greg.
Michael.
I want to suggest that you wrap this response, Greg, the response to Greg's question, up in your closing remark. And you please let us know what else is needed in order to get going faster with regard to landscape restoration that makes a tangible contribution to peace and stability within its limitation that we discussed and we are not planned. While responding,
because for us, this is the foundation of fact. Like, this is what we're trying to do, is, you know, create this new research paradigm. So I'll back off and let you all do your closing statements. Yeah.
Who would like to start?
Yeah, I can start. So I actually love that question, and thank you so much, Greg. And I think this is exactly what needs to happen. And an example of how CIFOR-ICRAF is doing that is that we're actually embedding research in development. So it's about transdisciplinary research. So it's not just government doing restoration or just development. It's bringing everyone on board, all actors and interdisciplinary teams, to really make sure we're embedding the research into development to scale and accelerate impact on the ground.
Thank you, Leigh. Abdiya. Hassan, what are your wishes for research?
My wishes for this research and what I've learned today and had, I think once the research is done or is discussed or is written down, it's good to share and also implement.
Right. I can't agree more. Thank you very much, Abdiya. Sharon, what's your take on this?
Definitely, and I think research is really critical, and I think for national organizations, we are rarely engaging in that, and I think partnerships, critical partnerships are really important. We do more of the action and less of the research, so and we may not have the capacity, so those partnerships are really important.
Thank you. Dereje.
Thank you very much. I can't agree more than this. In the context of dryland, where still evidence is lacking, you know, what we are talking about is investment. People with money need evidence, and we need to provide that evidence. And most importantly, at landscape level, yes, we have evidence from our small plots. We need to look at the landscape and what is coming, and then carefully really quantifying so that we can talk, and that resource and attention will go to this environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the panel. Greg, I would like to ask Immaculate to close the session, yeah, and also share her insights. Immaculate, at the background, monitoring our question and answer. 43. What do we do with all of those?
I don't know if, I mean, I'm very grateful to everyone who joined the session. And I mean, 44 open questions and 15 answered questions. That's quite something. That shows how people find the topic really relevant, and there's still a lot for conversations. And I'm hoping that we could even have a second version of this webinar where, you know, we can pick up again. So mine is just to say thank you. Thank you to everyone for taking your time for the questions. This is indeed a very relevant, a very timely topic. And as you've said, collaboration is really critical. So I'm hoping that in the back end, people have also been speaking to each other, forming collaborations in the back end, and we hope that we'll do this again. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.